Hi there, I'm the Mythkeeper. Welcome back to my channel. This week we're going back to my creature feature series, and I'm talking about a creature type that is very central to the lore and history of the world of Pathfinder. Now, in the past they were referred to as the Aboleths, but I think with the change from the open gaming license to the orc license, Pathfinder is going to be avoiding the use of words that are typically associated with Dungeons and Dragons. So the word going forward will be their more correct term, the Alghollthus. These are fish-like entities that dwell under the sea, and they were directly responsible for causing the Earthfall cataclysm in an attempt to wipe out the first big human civilization of Azlant. I think this will be a really fun video. If you're new here and you like this kind of Pathfinder content, be sure to like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to know about other types of creatures, let me know in the comments below. I read all the comments. I love getting them. In any case, let's get into the video.
Deep beneath the oceans of Golarion, there dwell a physically diverse, closely related group of creatures who refer to themselves as the Alghollthus, a name which in their own tongue means the ones who are all. And though largely hidden from the view of the surface world, they still extend their tentacled grasp towards a destiny of absolute dominion over all living things. Of all the important creatures in the game of Pathfinder, the Alghollthu have the most humble real-world origins, being brought in originally as the Aboleths, which were featured in the 3rd edition D&D Open Gaming license. Aboleths were in turn featured in the earliest editions of the game of Dungeons & Dragons. Inspired by the works of H.P. Lovecraft, these aquatic creatures first appeared in the 1st edition module, Dwellers of the Forbidden City. 1st edition expanded on the Aboleth in Dragon Magazine, creating multiple subraces like the Grand Aboleth, the Ruler Aboleth, and the Noble Aboleth, something which we will see emulated somewhat in the ecology of the Alghollthu in Pathfinder. Aboleths didn't make it into the core rules, however, until relatively late in the history of the game, appearing for the first time in the AD&D 2nd edition Monstrous Compendium Volume 2, which was only released in 1989, featuring this fairly uninspired artwork. The original Aboleth was described as a plump fish, 20 feet in length from its bulbous head to its fluke-like tail. Its principal attacks were its grasping tentacles, but in addition to this, the thing that made it unique was its high intelligence score and its ability to telepathically command thralls. Something struck a chord with players in the idea of an aquatic creature with mental powers. The notion that such a creature could make use of magically controlled thralls on the surface to extend its reach beyond the limits of its physiology made it a more compelling foe than most other aquatic creatures. This creature appeared in the first monster manual of 3rd edition, and therefore correspondingly entered the OGL in the year 2000. In Pathfinder, these creatures became the Alghollthu, when their ecology was deeply explored as part of the Pathfinder 1st edition Ruins of Azlant Adventure Path, released in 2017, but they had been a critical part of the lore since the very beginning, because for whatever reason, the team at Paizo decided it was these creatures that called down the Earthfall cataclysm to wipe out the first upstart human civilization, the ancient Azlanti. So let's take a deeper look at the Alghollthu, their related breeds, and their many servants in the world of Pathfinder. The history of the Alghollthu in the world of Pathfinder. Many cultures across the world of Pathfinder have possibly apocryphal creation myths that explain their origins, but few claim to have existed since the beginning of time, as the Alghollthu do. Certainly they came into being long before the deities turned their attention to the material plane. Earliest accounts of the Alghollthu describe a spontaneous awakening in an unfathomable time, a solitary Alghollthu emerging from a pool of primordial slime on an unknown world. The initial experience of this original Alghollthu was not visual, but rather a sensory perception of fragments from a vast and spectacular cataclysm in the sky above. Contemporary Alghollthu debate whether this represented the remnants of a distant star's explosive demise or the collapse of some dimensional rift. Nevertheless, all Alghollthu can tap into their cellular memory and recall the same distant image of a strange and colorful destruction spanning the horizons above. They unanimously agree that this cataclysm likely served as a source of the life ember that invigorated not only the simple organisms within their primal pool, but also triggered the initial awakening of the first Alghollthu. Within its surroundings, the new Alghollthu sensed an abundance of similar yet lesser life forms devoid of awareness and will. From this realization, the first dictum of the Alghollthus was born. Life is to be controlled. The Alghollthu discovered the truth of its own mortality when it recognized its finite energy reserves and delicate physical structure. It extended its tentacles towards the nearest organism, absorbing them through its thin, membranous cocoon. Its hunger was abated. However, the Alghollthu soon realized that this alone was insufficient for its survival. When the next organism swam by, the first Alghollthu swiftly seized it, but instead of dismantling it for its constituent parts, the Alghollthu learned to push its mind and will into the creature. This moment marked a second discovery. The Alghollthu could now command rather than merely consume. Thus the second dictum was born. Alghollthu are the masters. Now capable of sustaining its heightened energy requirements, the Alghollthu set out to dominate every living thing within reach. It even developed new mobility through its questing pseudopod tentacles as its body expanded from the assimilated cells. Yet its fragile and ephemeral existence on a young world under a nascent sun remained finite. It sensed its own structure pushing beyond the limits of their composition, and its fledgling consciousness was already fragmenting. Unable to express its fury at this inevitable fate, the Alghollthu helplessly felt its internal structures collapsing. A fissure formed in its membrane, and it sensed the ember of its life slipping away from the core of its consciousness. But the sensation abruptly ceased as it collided with the wall of a newly forming membrane. The faltering consciousness stabilized within a bewildering duality as the membrane fully fissured, and its essence was no longer drained away. It suddenly realized there were two entities where once there was one. Thus the third dictum arose: Alghollthu are eternal, as many and one. Through a series of progressive evolutions and the strategic dissemination of life forms, the Alghollthus eventually achieved complete dominion over their original homeworld. This marked the establishment of what they proudly referred to as the First Empire. For thousands of years, the Alghollthu reigned supreme here, exercising unbridled control over the lesser sentient beings of their planet. However, this era of Alghollthu supremacy came to an abrupt end, when unforeseen circumstances disrupted their rule. The precise cause of this upheaval remains shrouded in uncertainty. It could have stemmed from dissension within their own society, inadvertent errors in their magical and psychic manipulations, or the emergence of religious beliefs and genuine divine patronage among their servile subjects. Whatever the catalyst, the tide swiftly turned against the Alghollthu, plunging them into an all-out war with their former slaves. Caught off guard and ill-prepared for the rebellion, the Alghollthu responded with direct aggression aimed at quashing the uprising. However, they grossly underestimated the unwavering determination of their countless former slaves, and soon found themselves embroiled in a devastating war of attrition. Outnumbered and soon on the brink of extinction, they were compelled to retreat, deep into the labyrinthine recesses of their world, beyond the reach of their relentless adversaries. In a momentous gathering of these surviving Alghollthu, the wisest and most magically gifted among them were chosen to embark on a voluntary sacrifice. By merging their cellular matter and consciousness, they sought to create a new entity capable of leading their species towards salvation. Thus, the Veiled Masters came into existence, formed from the collective essence of the select few. Endowed with heightened intelligence, these Veiled Masters pooled their vast knowledge and expertise, focusing their efforts on the meticulous study and mastery of glyph magic. Over the course of 80 arduous years, the relentless pursuit of the rebelling slaves steadily encroached upon the Alghollthu's dwindling strongholds. With less than 1,000 Alghollthu remaining, their survival hinged on the guidance of only a few dozen Veiled Masters. Unyielding in their determination, these Veiled Masters toiled tirelessly for over a decade, laboring to create two immensely powerful glyphs in the deepest recesses of their imperiled world. With resolute purpose, the Veiled Masters activated the first glyph, unleashing a network of magical gateways that led to other habitable worlds they had discovered. These distant realms would serve as new havens, where smaller Alghollthu colonies, overseen by Veiled Masters, could rebuild and flourish under carefully regulated conditions. All but one of the Veiled Masters escaped through the portals, each accompanied by no more than a few score Alghollthu. As the portal glyph neared the end of its existence, the avenging slaves arrived, poised to exact their retribution upon the Alghollthu who would remain to safeguard the Exodus. Sensing the imminent threat, the final Veiled Master activated the second glyph. In a cataclysmic display of magical devastation, the very core of the planet collapsed upon itself, resulting in a catastrophic implosion that consumed the entire world within minutes. With his grim task finally complete, this last Veiled Master solemnly whispered the final dictum to the surviving Alghollthu who had taken to the stars. to extend beyond one's grasp is to imperil eternity. It should be clear now the grave peril that the Alghollthu posed to any worlds they fled to. These beings had simple instructions from the collective of veiled masters on their homeworld, to spread, to control, to fortify, but to never extend beyond their grasp. If the Alghollthu mission should ever become compromised, the leaders of their kind would take astonishingly dire measures to ensure the worst would not happen once again. The Alghollthu arrived on Golarion during the Age of Creation, and as per their mission they began to take control of the planet's oceans. And sure enough, in time, their influence was felt all across the oceans of the world. The Veiled Master, which had led his people across the portal, over time grew large enough to divide himself through binary fission, as his ancestors had done, producing other Veiled Masters, each being lesser clones of itself. While they controlled the oceans, they soon learned by traversing underground reservoirs that the deep places of the earth were squarely in the control of another ancient species. These were the Zeomorns, the so-called vault builders and vault keepers that hollowed out the great recesses of Orv beneath Golarion's surface in the Age of Creation. A terrible war ensued between the Alghollthu and the Zeomorns. It is thought by some, although this is unconfirmed, that in order to battle the Zeomorns on the ground, the Alghollthu raised humans from barbarism and taught them magic, which in turn led to the precursor people of the Azlanti. If this is indeed true, then perhaps it could be said that the Alghollthus of Golarion failed to adhere to their own final dictum. Their reach had exceeded their grasp. They did, however, manage to defeat the Zeomorns, who ultimately abandoned Golarion, their great works undone, and fled to build new vaults and serve their strange ancient mission elsewhere in the planes, particularly in the elemental plane of Earth, where their kind can still be found in great numbers. I have plans to discuss the Zeomorns or Vault Builders in more detail in a future creature feature. The Age of Legend begins with the foundation of the human empire of Azlant on a great island continent in the Arcadian Ocean. In the beginning, the Alghollthu did not fear the Azlanti, for the Azlanti would actually inadvertently continue to serve the purposes of the Veiled Masters. Indeed, the interactions between humans and Alghollthu were handled by the Veiled Masters, who used illusion magic to disguise themselves and walk amongst humanity in the guise of powerful wizards, who were stewards and advisors to the great emperors of ancient Azlant. Unlike the lords of their homeworld, the Veiled Masters of Golarion had decided not to exert direct control, but to control rather through deception and subterfuge, and for many millennia this worked exactly as planned. However, two things occurred in rapid succession that compromised this. The first was the investigation of the wizard Zin, who first discovered the subtle influence of the Alghollthu on his people. He attempted to alert the Empire, but eventually he was forced out, and he and his followers fled to form the Kingdom of Thassalon. Indeed, the Thessalonian rune magic of the Rune Lords was in part an adaptation of the glyph magic pioneered by the Veiled Masters, and the Thessalonian practice of flesh warping also had its root in Abelethi practices designed to evolve their own species over time. Interestingly, this in turn would serve as the teachings that would make their way into the hands of the Nexian flesh warpers, who are still masters of this craft today. As we can see, much power in Golarion can be traced back to the first Alghollthu civilizations. Following Zin's exile, the Empire's premier swordmaker and blacksmith, a man named Aradin, was asked by the Emperor of Azlant, who was failing in health, to choose his successor for him, for he trusted his counsel more than anyone else's. Aradin had become aware of the Alghollthu, and he named himself Emperor, thinking he was the only one that could root out that corruption. Aradin had been a servant of the moon goddess Akavna at the time, and she warned him that the Alghollthu would do something dramatic in response to his choice, but even she could not predict their actions until it was too late. Ultimately, Golarion's Veiled Masters convened the Council of Malthru, the Alghollthu Council of All Worlds. They suggested a bold course of action. In anticipation of this grave act, the Golarion speaker of the Malthru was devolved into non-sentient single-celled organisms, and more than half of Golarion's Alghollthus population agreed to enter hibernation in the deepest oceans and caverns until given permission by the Malthru Council to re-emerge. This ancient council from across the stars then used master glyphs to reach out into the darkness of space and draw down a large meteor from the heavens, known as the Starstone, to obliterate the upstart humans. It is said that when Akavna learned of the Alghollthus' plan to destroy the continent, she was determined to make a stand to protect Golarion and her people from the incoming Earthfall. Akavna pulled Golarion's moon from its orbit to intercept the massive meteorite. The impact with the moon shattered the world-killing projectile into thousands of pieces that haphazardly bounced both into Golarion and across the void of space, some striking the goddess herself and inflicting lethal wounds on the goddess's physical manifestation. Akavna's corpse plummeted into the planet of Golarion, landing at the site of an abandoned Calwinvian observatory, obliterating the structure and penetrating deep into the planet's crust. The mordant spire rose from her grave, formed from the essence of her soul as it attempted to reach Pharasma's boneyard. The strange masked elves who currently inhabit the spire are said to be able to hear the whispers of Akavna even now, thousands of years after her death. Distraught by Akavna's death, Akavna's divine lover Amaznen, an Azlanti god of magic, also sacrificed himself to render the remaining deadly Alghollthu magic clinging to the meteorite fragments inert, transforming it from a world killer to one that, while still incredibly destructive, gave life on Golarion a chance to survive. When it impacted with Golarion, it completely obliterated the continent of Azlant and plunged the world into the Age of Darkness, but did not cause the death of all life on Golarion, thanks in large part to the sacrifices made by these two Azlanti deities. In fact, it may be because of their sacrifice and death at the hands of the Starstone that this long-buried stone acquired the mythic power it did, to grant those worthy a spark of divinity. It would be millennia later that Aradin himself would raise the Starstone, ushering in the Age of Enthronement and becoming the first of Golarion's ascended human gods. The Alghollthu plans were unwound. The surface civilizations have grown powerful in their slumber. There are still many Alghollthu survivors, however, and now many of the Veiled Masters have also come out of hibernation. But their great lord, the Golarion speaker of the Malstru, has yet to be reconstituted. Despite their significant impact on Golarion's history, still, few on Golarion truly understand the danger these creatures represent, and most underestimate the power of the dwellers in the deep. While there are various breeds of Alghollthu, they all share some base similarities. They are a notably Piscine species, with robust slimy bodies perfectly adapted for gliding through deep, tenebrous waters and obscure caverns. Their physique features a finned tail and various tentacles that serve both as propellers and dexterous appendages for gripping and manipulating objects. Remarkably intelligent and possessing an innate affinity for magic, the Alghollthu possess another distinctive characteristic that sets them apart from other species: their bioactive slime. Through the production of this slime, they can swiftly induce physiological alterations in themselves and others who come into contact with it. Moreover, they can employ it as a medium for genetically modifying and guiding the evolution of biological organisms, crafting them into new desired forms with enhanced functionalities. The versatility of their slime is truly remarkable. One notable application of the slime is evident in the varying tail structures observed among the Alghollthu. Some possess caudal tails, ideal for traversing the depths of their aquatic abodes, while others boast fluke tails, suited for maneuvering through labyrinthine caverns. However, the significance of the Alghollthu slime extends beyond their own physiological adaptations. In fact, it played a pivotal role in the early development of flesh-warping techniques, often attributed to the Dark Elves and their demon lord Hagenti, or the Nexians, who claim to have innovated their own practice in the Great War with the undead nation of Geb. In truth, it was the Alghollthu who pioneered these methods, using their slime to mold and shape living organisms according to their will, long before others laid claim to such practices. The Vidileths. The Veiled Master, or the Vidileth, are the true leaders and the most powerful of the Alghollthu. In appearance, they share similarities with more standard Alghollthu breeds, possessing 6 eyes and 6 tentacles, specifically adapted for enhanced functionality. 2 of these tentacles end in hand-like appendages, while the remaining 4 culminate in potent electrically charged spheres. They are also larger as well, growing up to 30 feet in length and weighing up to 8,000 pounds. However, the distinctions between them extend far beyond the physical attributes. Beyond their superior physical powers, Veiled Masters possess exceptional mental and magical abilities. They possess the capacity to assimilate the memories of other creatures, and are master transmuters as well as illusionists, allowing them to flawlessly adopt the forms of various species. These particular Alghollthu achieved genuine mastery over glyph magic countless eons ago, elevating their power to unprecedented levels. These many advantages have enabled them to move unnoticed amidst humanoid land races for thousands of years. During this time, they have diligently observed, schemed, and manipulated from the shadows. The Vidileths of Golarion were all produced through a process of fission from an original Vidileth that entered Golarion during the Age of Creation. That first Vidileth, also referred to as Golarion's Speaker, was dissembled in anticipation for the Earthfall Cataclysm, to be reconstituted by the rest of the Malstru Council at the appointed time, which has not yet occurred. By all accounts, the Speaker himself is an immensely powerful entity, verging on deific, putting to shame even the vast power of the Vidileths and the Omnipaths. The Omnipaths. Omnipaths are a highly specialized evolved Alghollthu subrace, who serve as the communicators and coordinators of Alghollthu activity. They use their exceptional memory and telepathic mesh to share information and alert each other of threats. The Omnipaths are required by the Alghollthu to convene their Council of Worlds. The Omnipath is an eel-like creature with 3 nested jaws of glassy teeth, up to 8 eyes, no tentacles, and 3 glowing balls on its tail. Omnipaths are 25 feet long and weigh 2 tons each. Most Omnipaths are powerful servants of the Veiled Masters, allowing them to orchestrate plans through their telepathic mesh. Many Omnipaths ride in their victims' bodies to walk the surface, seeing and hearing through the host's eyes and ears, and due to their vast insight about surface cultures and practices, they are able to accurately mimic the behavior of their victims, deceiving even friends and family. Sometimes the truth is never discovered, and their victims serve as unwilling spies for the Alghollthus on the surface until death. Omnipaths remember everything they experience, accumulating a hoard of knowledge shared between all Omnipaths. This makes them inscrutably alien entities and impossible for mortal kind to relate to. Alghollthu Master, or Elder. The Alghollthu Masters, not to be confused with the Veiled Masters, represent the elders of their race, and are the breed referred to when someone uses the term Aboleth. The Elders, meaning not additionally specialized species, are the most common breed. With 6 eyes and 6 tendrils, this nightmarish, prehistoric fish-looking creature is a master of magic, and each is an individually terrifying threat in its own right, often ruling their own individual underwater kingdoms. From head to tail, an Alghollthu Elder is around 25 feet long, and their bulky bodies weigh well over 6,000 pounds. Although particularly renowned for their mastery of enchantments, particularly mind-affecting abilities to charm or dominate their foes, they are also experts at illusion magic, and many are adept necromancers as well, bringing to battle undead minions as well as living thralls. Uldraaghu. The Alghollthu subspecies known as the Uldraaghu, or the Thalassic Architects, possess telekinetic abilities that allow them to manipulate physical matter. They are smaller than the Elders, measuring approximately 15 feet in length and weighing around 2,800 pounds. They also only have 5 eyes, 4 of them positioned on either side of the head, while the 5th eye, larger in size, sits at the center, emitting a brilliant white glow. These architects possess 4 tentacles, with 2 ending in claws capable of manipulating objects, while the other 2 vibrate at high frequencies, enabling them to carve glyphs into solid stone. Their silvery bodies often feature dark bands of scales. Thalassic architects came into existence when the ruling Alghollthu recognized their inability to perform certain physical tasks without relying on lesser beings for assistance was a weakness. Unwilling to become dependent on servant races, the Alghollthu selectively bred a new subspecies to fulfill these responsibilities. Initially, Thalassic architects could only manipulate earth and stone, leaving the more mundane labor to their Ulat-Kini servants. However, after thousands of years of evolution, modern Thalassic architects can disassemble and reassemble matter on an almost molecular level. Plizeazoths. Although absolutely massive, these 22-foot-wide, ray-looking creatures have a low status in Alghollthu society. Plizeazoths are kept as something akin to pets by their masters. Plizeazoths are brutish, bestial, and primarily rely on their primal instincts. They are impressive in physical and mental might, though, but many Plizeazoths do not comprehend their power, having long been bred for subservience to the Veiled Masters. Immune to pain and unable to truly comprehend their value within Alghollthu society, Plizeazoths are generally content to serve their masters. Typically, they only leave Alghollthu cities if they have missions abroad, and because of this, they are relatively unknown by surface dwellers. Their victims only recall foggy memories of them, which have been erased by the emotional and psychic scars. The rare victims that remember Plizeazoths recount brutal psychological assaults, breaking down reality into a twisting landscape of pain and despair, with the only escape being servitude to the Plizeazoths' master. Plizeazoths never typically build homes and are content to graze near deep trenches for food until commanded. Plizeazoths are usually solitary, but the Veiled Masters have been known to give mission to pairs on occasion, and instructions to cooperate in carrying it out if necessary. Because of their vast size and power, Plizeazoths that develop increased intellect could become a threat even to other Alghollthu, although their rulers likely have numerous contingencies in place to deal with that unlikely outcome. Enisysians. The least of the Alghollthu breed are the Enisysians, the existence of which remains a secret known only to few outside the Alghollthu species. In fact, even the name itself is shrouded in uncertainty, as it was discovered partially obliterated within the papers of a scholar whose inquiries presumably led to his demise. Physically delicate, Enisysians are jellyfish-like creatures, possessing bodies resembling parachutes, adorned with numerous tiny tentacles. They possess a unique attribute that grants them significance to Alghollthu culture. They possess the ability to amplify the psychic powers of other Alghollthu. Therefore, the Veiled Masters take great care in tending to the Enisysians. Servants of the Alghollthu. Because of their powerful ability to exert mental influence over the weak-willed, the Alghollthu make use of a broad range of creatures. However, there are a few species among their servants that stand out. The Ulat-Kini, commonly known as the aquatic scum, a slave race bred by the Alghollthu to work for them as servants and laborers. The Chuuls, the original forms of which served the Alghollthu as crustacean-like beasts of burden, but were later bred as a warrior caste, and the Ugothol, or the faceless stalkers, which were bred to infiltrate enemy societies. Ulat-Kini. The Ulat-Kini are an ancient race of green-skinned aquatic humanoids. A typical Ulat-Kini stands half a foot taller than a typical human, but weighs nearly twice as much, due to its increased muscle mass. Their rubbery flesh is protected by tough scales, fins, and spines, which also allow them to swim better. In order to allow them to live comfortably underwater, the Ulat-Kini's necks are laden with gills, and their heads resemble those of fish. Despite their aquatic appearance, they were created from human stock originally, but flesh-warped into a more amphibious form to serve as a slave race for the aquatic Alghollthus. Ulat-Kini represent the Alghollthus' ideal humanoid slave, strong, amphibious, and very vulnerable to mental influence. Every Ulat-Kini, in fact, is born imprinted with a specific mental marker, which can be seen via telepathy and identifies the individual Alghollthu who owns that lineage. The modern population of Ulat-Kini is divided into two distinct groups, the masterless and the loyal. The masterless are those who were abandoned after the Earthfall, which have formed tribes and now reside in deserted Alghollthu strongholds or in other locations they emigrated to over the long millennia since. Within each tribe, leadership falls upon the oldest or strongest, although the power structure remains relatively loose. Most of these tribes have lost their previous military discipline, regressing into a state of savagery. They predominantly inhabit areas close to water, as landlocked tribes have perished due to the absence of plankton, their primary food source. In a few places, however, like the Sightless Sea located in the depths of Orv, loyal Ulat-Kini continue to proudly serve the Alghollthu, maintaining their magical abilities and civilized demeanor. Over the many millennia following the Earthfall, the loyal underwent further flesh-warping and were segregated into different castes, including such creatures as giant Ulat-Kini hulks who fulfill menial labor tasks, intelligent bioluminescent prodigies who tend to the needs of the Alghollthu masters, and small unintelligent ravagers who serve as watchdogs, among countless other specialized roles. Chuul. The modern Chuuls descend from some of the earliest experiments of the Veiled Masters, which took the form of immense crayfish, which the Alghollthu used as steeds and beasts of burden. These were later further modified and given sapience, giving rise to the creation of a species of evil crustacean-like ambush predators found in swamps and along shorelines. Chuuls are natural ambushers, waiting underwater for prey to pass close, at which point they paralyze their target with their tentacles and either drown it or eat it alive. While they are good swimmers, they prefer terrestrial prey. Surface-dwelling Chuul prefer to feed on Eruxi or Grippli, while ones living in deep caves will eat anything they can get their hands on, although they tend to avoid troglodytes whose taste and smell they intensely dislike. Chuuls are technically intelligent and capable of speech, but have very limited interaction with other intelligent beings. Being bred for war, they feel a great drive to inflict physical harm to other sapient creatures, taunting and degrading their paralyzed victims before feeding. Even among their own kind, Chuul only appear to congregate for reproduction. Some Ulat-Kini view Chuuls as akin to older siblings, but also fear them as predators. Chuuls, for their part, do not seem to recognize a kinship, and readily prey on any Ulat-Kini encroaching on their territory. Ugothol. Ugothols, or faceless stalkers, are dark crimson masses of pliant flesh and scaly skin. While humanoid in shape, they are completely lacking in facial features. The whole body is covered in the same amorphous skin, which seems to move unnaturally around its body. A faceless stalker can change its appearance to mimic any human-sized creature, and the flexible body of a faceless stalker is so elastic that it can easily squeeze through very tight spaces. The ecology of the stalkers, who were biologically designed as infiltrating weapons, is inherently unique and unnatural. Their bodies lack bones to maintain their elasticity, which is vital for their role as infiltrators. Among their various unsettling aspects, feeding stands out. Devoid of mouths, they consume the bodily fluids of their victims by sucking them through proboscis-like feeding tubes. Even more disturbing, faceless stalkers display a preference for feeding on live victims. While this feeding method cannot be used as an offensive attack, witnessing a faceless stalker feeding on a bound victim is enough to unsettle even the most seasoned of warriors. Because faceless stalkers were engineered to infiltrate societies and bring about their collapse from within, much of this original mission remains ingrained in the faceless stalkers' primal instincts. Consequently, they often infiltrate small villages, systematically eliminating and replacing the original residents. Thereafter, they deplete the community's resources until there is nothing left, before moving on to the next target. Faceless stalker tribes tend to be small, rarely exceeding a dozen members, as larger tribes typically succumb to internal conflicts. Ironically, despite being creations of the atheist Alghollthus, many faceless stalkers themselves embrace religious beliefs, often worshipping the parasite deity known as Glounder.